And I want to remind you that this is all on the web page. So if you can't get it all down, you can definitely refer to the web page. But I just picked some scholars to show you that our definition of organizational communication that we came up with at the beginning of this lecture actually is coherent to what scholars are saying. Let's look at the first scholar. Barnard says that organizational communication is a system of consciously coordinated personal activities or forces, a system of interrelated activities. Exactly what we were talking about. We talked about how communication is a transaction between two or more people. Barnard says that's exactly right because we've got this system of activities going on within an organization to create communication. The second one is from Davis. It's a group of people working together under a leader to accomplish an objective. Exactly what we were talking about. Communication within an organization is all about humans and all about people working together to create some sort of objective or goal. A lot of organizations have mission statements or visions. All these types of things are trying to be achieved because of humans getting together and trying to achieve them. The third one is from Stodgill, and he says that it's a structured system of behavior with a position and roles comprising it having the potential of being pre-structured. And his idea is a structured system of behavior similar to what we were saying of human behavior, which is all structured. And we're going to actually talk about structural organizational communication in just a bit. But he is actually talking about what we just discussed. The next one is Presthus, which he says is a system of structural interpersonal relations. Individuals are differentiated in terms of authority, status, and role. Personal interaction is prescribed. And he's right on talking about interpersonal relations. Personal interaction is prescribed. Right what we're talking about, human interaction. And finally, we end with Lawrence and Lorsch, and they say that the coordination of different activities of individual contributors to carry out planned transactions with the environment. Again, they're looking at the idea of having a mission, having an objective, trying to reach those through activities that humans are involved in. So right here, we can see that through these definitions of organization, we're right on, and now I hope we have a general understanding of what organizational communication is. Let's go to the next slide, and let's look at some areas of organizational communication. I can't impress on you enough how vast this discipline is. It's absolutely amazing the amount of material that's been researched within organizational communication. Matter of fact, I feel like I'm not even giving you a good representation of it because it's so vast. But just to give you some idea of the areas of organizational communication, here's just some examples. And I think a lot of you might be familiar with some of these ideas. Of course, organizational communication theory is what we're studying right now. There's a whole discipline of organizational communication gender. You can look at diversity within Org Comm. That's a big one nowadays. Conflict and conflict resolution within organizational communication. Relationships and how they evolve and mature within Org Comm. Culture is a large one, and we'll talk about that towards the end of this lecture today. Structure's a great Org Comm. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. Leadership is a big discipline of organizational communication. It is fascinating to study because then you'll be prepared to become that leader within Org Comm. Nonverbals, Greg will talk about some nonverbals in earlier tapes. Climate within Org Comm, technology obviously is a huge thing, especially within the Northwest with our Hewlett-Packards and Intels and all these companies, is a large area within Org Comm. Consulting, oh, what a fascinating field that is within organizational communication and very demanding. Ethics, vision and mission, all of these areas, and of course this is just scratches the surface of the areas of Org Comm, are very applicable to all of our lives. And by knowing more about them, we can succeed in whatever areas we're going to go into in the future. Go ahead and just take a second and look at these and kind of reflect on what you think each of these mean and how you've seen these areas within your organizations that you've participated in. Let's go ahead and take one of these specific areas of organizational communication and kind of bring it to life so that you can see a glimpse of the vastness within each of these areas. Let's choose structure. I think that structure is very applicable for all of us because we are students right now. We're learning about theory, and we're going to try to apply it to whatever we do in the future. I think structure is really important because it can help us to see what type of organization we'd like to work in, and then to try to find that organization in order to create that match. On the next slide, we say that organization communication structure is the most central idea in fundamentalist perspective of organizational communication. The definition is systems of pathways through which messages flow. Systems of pathways through which messages flow. The next definition is patterns of interaction among people who comprise the organization. And I think that most of you are starting to catch on that this is the primary source of organizational communication. It's who talks to who communicates with whom, and what does this whole structure look like? What is going on within the organization? I'm sure some of us have gone into organizations and you just can't quite figure it out. You know, it's not like the typical organization that it's maybe superior to subordinate, and you're trying to figure out who communicates with whom and how does communication process throughout the organization. And so that's one thing that we're going to look at today. There's two types of organizational structure, and I think that to some of you this might already be familiar, but you maybe haven't seen it written down or actually verbalized. And so one of the types of organizational communication structures is formal organizational communication structure, and the other is informal. And actually on the next slide I have a task for you. It's a structural task. What I would like you to do is, when at the beginning of this lecture we started to think about organizations that you were involved in. And what I want you to do is really assess those organizations that you were involved in and think about them and that you belong to and that fit each of the organizational structures that I'm going to explain to you. I want you to provide the story mentally in your head that are parallel to the structures that I'm going to explain. That way it will help you internalize what we're going to talk about. Okay? The first thing we're going to look at is formal communication structure. And the definition of that is communication through officially designated channels of message flow between organizational positions. And I think most of us are familiar with that within large organizations that we've been in. They are officially designated channels of message flow between organizational positions. And in other words, what that means is they are predetermined organizational structures. So when you enter an organization as a new employee or as a new member, or if it's a social group and you just happen to be hanging out, there's already predetermined areas or structures within the communication realm that already are established, and you're just fitting into that. Some examples of this are organizational charts. When we enter an organization, sometimes you just ask for the chart and you can see how everything is all laid out. Maybe it's through the policy manual, which sometimes organizations give you, and you can read through those and see how you fit into the policy manual. Or their hierarchical structures. That's a big one within large organizations. And of course, starting off, some of us might be starting at the bottom of the totem pole. And the goal is to work your way up. Or other fortunate ones of us maybe start right in the middle or at the top. But you know where you start, whether it's through your job description, or it's through the salary that you're making, or it's through the people that you sit by, or the department that you're in. No matter what area describes this hierarchical structure, you definitely know where you fit in. And I think you guys kind of know what I'm talking about. I think that's the first thing that I do when I'm interviewing for jobs. I'm like, okay, now how low am I on this totem pole and how high am I? So this is what formal communication is. And